All right, let's talk about cloud security. But not in that boring technical way with just a bunch of jargon. Today, we're going to look at it as the art of building a digital fortress designed to protect our most valuable stuff online. So let's dive in and see how it's done. So think about this for a second. Back in the day, if you had treasure, you'd build a castle, right? You'd have moats, high walls, guards, the whole deal. Well, in today's world, our data, that's our treasure. So how do you possibly protect it when it's stored in the cloud, a place that feels kind of everywhere and nowhere at the same time? The answer, it turns out, is to build a modern fortress. And just like any great castle, it all starts with a master blueprint. In our world, that blueprint is called the cloud security architecture. And it's not just one thing, it's the entire strategic plan. It's the whole shebang that lays out all the policies, the tools, and the controls we're going to use to keep our data safe. So, where do we even begin building this fortress? Well, you start at the most obvious place, the front door. We have to guard the gates because, honestly, a fortress is only as strong as its gatekeepers. The number one golden rule of the fortress is actually pretty simple. You want the right people to have the right access. Nothing more and definitely nothing less. This is the absolute core idea behind what the pros call identity and access management, or IAM. It's all about making sure only the right people get in, and that once they're in, they can only go where they're supposed to. So how does that actually work in practice? Well, it breaks down into three pretty logical steps. First, you have to prove you are who you say you are. And you do that with more than just a password. That's multi-factor authentication. Then, once you're verified, you get a specific set of keys based on your role in the castle. That's role-based access. And finally, those keys, they only open the doors you absolutely need to go through. That's the principle of least privilege. Simple, smart, and incredibly powerful. Okay, so the gates are secure, but what about the walls and the moats? Well, you can think of firewalls as those big, high stone walls that block any unwanted visitors. Your virtual private cloud, or VPC, that's like your own private, walled-off territory inside the bigger cloud kingdom. And network segmentation, that's just a fancy way of saying we build walls inside the main castle, dividing it up. That way, if an attacker gets into one area, they can't just run wild through the whole place. It contains the damage. And we can't forget about the messengers. Every single device that connects to our fortress, whether it's a laptop, a phone, whatever, is a potential way in. So endpoint security is all about checking those devices to make sure they aren't secretly a Trojan horse, ready to unleash a threat once they're inside our carefully guarded walls. All right, our perimeter is solid. Let's head deeper inside the fortress, because now it's time to protect the really valuable stuff. The data, the applications, the crown jewels. Now here's a really crucial point. Data has to be protected in two different states, and we use encryption to do it. First, you have data at rest. That's the treasure just sitting there, locked in the vault. We encrypt it so that even if a thief manages to break in, all they get is a bunch of unreadable nonsense. Then you have data in transit. That's the treasure being moved from one vault to another. We encrypt that too, so no one can spy on it or snatch it while it's on the move. Now, if the data is our treasure, then our applications are the throne room. It's the center of the action. So we post a special guard called a Web Application Firewall, or WAF, right outside the door. But security also starts way earlier, when you're building the room itself, making sure there are no secret passages or backdoors through secure coding. And of course, you have to constantly check for cracks in the walls by running regular scans. You see, a fortress isn't just a static bunch of walls. It's a living, breathing thing. And to be truly secure, it needs constant vigilance. It needs an ever-watchful guard, someone patrolling the grounds 24/7, always on the lookout for trouble. So what tools do our modern guards have? Well, a SIEM system is like the central watchtower. It sees everything happening across the entire fortress from one single spot. Log monitoring? That's the guard's detailed logbook, keeping track of every single person who comes and goes. And threat intelligence is like getting reports from your spies about new attack methods so your guards know exactly what to watch out for. But what happens if something gets through and the alarm bells start ringing? Well, you can't panic. A well-prepared fortress always has an incident response plan. Step one is to execute that plan, period. That usually involves securing your assets, often through automated backups, and having a disaster recovery plan ready to go so you can rebuild and get back to normal as fast as possible. So, we've built the walls, we've secured the treasure, we've posted the guards. We should be good to go, right? Well, not quite. Modern security demands one final critical piece. It's a total shift in mindset that ties everything else we've talked about together. This quote right here is the mantra of modern cybersecurity. It is such a simple idea, but it's incredibly powerful. See, in the old way of thinking, we kind of assumed that if you made it inside the castle walls, you were probably trustworthy. We now know that that assumption is a huge, massive vulnerability. And that brings us to what's called a zero-trust architecture. So imagine this. Instead of just checking your ID at the main gate, there's a guard at the door to every single room, every hallway, every closet inside the fortress. Every time you want to go somewhere new, you have to prove who you are and that you have permission again. That is zero trust, and it drastically limits the amount of damage an intruder can do if they ever get inside. So, as we wrap this up, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's that real cloud security is never about just one thing. It's not one magic product or one giant wall. It's about defense in depth. It's a whole strategy with layers upon layers. Walls, gates, internal checkpoints, watchful guards, and all of it built on a philosophy of constant vigilance. And that leaves us with one final thought, because this isn't just about big corporations. We all have a digital fortress, our email, our photos, our bank accounts. So it's worth taking a moment to ask yourself, who holds the keys to your fortress? And how well are your gates really being guarded?